This is Annie Grace, and welcome to this Naked Mind podcast. And I'm here today with Meagan. Welcome, Meagan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Welcome we're talking, I'm in Colorado, you're in Paris. That's super cool.
It is very cool. I love your architecture too in your house.
Looks very, very exotic. Funny to be like night and day, but that's the great thing about technology these days. It's amazing.
Exactly.
So why don't you kind of take us back to the beginning in your journey? Like, why don't you take me back to sort of where it all started for you? What was your first drink? How old were you? Stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Baltimore, Maryland originally. I currently live in Paris, France, and I've lived kind of all over. I lived in London, I lived in Chicago and LA and New York. But I've learned when I went to college in California that my childhood in Baltimore was quite, that we grew up quite fast, basically. And so I started drinking, I guess, when I was 12 years old. And my first time getting drunk was actually with my babysitter. And we went to a party with her, and I remember I lost my voice as well because I was smoking cigarettes, and it was, yeah, I thought it was just the cool thing to do, and my parents drank at home, and it was just kind of what we did, and I went to arts high school, and so we drank quite a lot there, and then in college, it continued it. I would often brag that I could go out all night and drink, and then I would be starring in a play. I was getting straight A's in college. I was a National Hispanic Scholar. I was the Dean Scholar. I was the Rainforest. I was a spokesperson for the Rainforest Association. It was like,
oh my gosh.
It was like almost like I was like proud that I could uphold all these things. And then I guess I really started, the first time I ever heard somebody declare that they had stopped drinking was, I was in LA and I was working in casting, and I'll never forget, this actress walked into the room and she came in, and the director knew her, and so he was like, "Oh my gosh, you look so great. Like, where have you been? How have you been?" And she was like, "Thanks. Like, yeah, I quit drinking." And I remember I was like 25, and I just thought, I was like, wow, somebody can just quit drinking? Like, that's like a thing, and 25. So I was probably, it was like 2007 or so. And I remember that always stuck with me because I'd always had this, I loved drinking, and I was always the kind of the life of the party. But at the same time, I always yearned for like a freedom from it, but I just never knew that there was a possibility of some sort of like freedom.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, like the fact that somebody could just declare like, you're not an alcoholic, but she just stopped drinking. It was like, that just seemed like, and she wasn't ostracized, and the guy, it was like, oh, okay. And so that was the first time I heard that. And then, I actually married an English guy, and so our relationship was very much based off around alcohol. It was very different with him because in America, it was more about, you would drink a little bit kind of every night, but it wasn't, and for him, it was like, you wouldn't drink during the week because the point of drinking was just to get drunk. And that was like more of the culture in England, was to, you drank to get drunk, but you were considered an alcoholic if you drank during the week, like in small doses. So, so then, he got really judgmental with me if I would drink during the week, and then I didn't understand why he had to get so hammered on the weekends. But yet at the same time, when I wanted to stop drinking, that caused a really big problem in our relationship. So, and then my mom found your book, a couple of years ago, and I had just actually moved to Paris, and I had really gotten into working out and getting in shape. And because I basically, when I moved to London, I got really bad adult acne. I had gained like 30 pounds. And it was kind of like, because the other side of it was, when I came to London, I thought, wow, this is a place where I can drink all I want, and people are kind of proud of it. Like you go into work the next day and they talk about how bad their hangover is. And it's like, you know, nobody's ashamed of how drunk they get. It's kind of like a badge of honor. So at first I was like, this is amazing. And so I drank even more when I was in London. And then it was like, oh, my acne started coming out. I gained all this weight. And so then when I worked at the New York Times, and when I moved, they moved me to Paris. That was when I was like, okay, I read your book and I'm going to stop drinking in Paris. It's like a whole new life for me. So then I moved to Paris and I decided to give up drinking. And my first dinner with my boss, my French boss, it was like 5 of us, and he was like introducing me to everybody, and I ordered water at the table. And not thinking that, you know, I just moved from England and there it was really looked down upon if you didn't drink. But in Paris, I thought it would be different because they were more civilized, so to speak. However, when I ordered the water, he looked at me and said, "You're not pregnant, are you?"
Mm.
And so I immediately was like, oh no, I'm definitely not pregnant. I ordered a glass of wine and I wanted to make sure that he knew that I was, you know, that there was no way I was going to be drinking. So, or then there's no way that he just moved me from London to Paris and that I was like pregnant, you know, so I wanted to prove to him that I wasn't. So then I basically drank for another year. And then I started getting again really into the health kick. So I stopped for like 3 months here and 3 months there. But then after 3 months, I would start drinking again and I would gain the weight back. And it was like this vicious cycle. So it was actually finally at Christmas this year where I decided for good that I was gonna stop. I'd actually given up smoking over Thanksgiving. And then for Christmas, it was really, I'd gone out to this house party at, you know, an expat house party. It was like all the strays. And I guess the other thing is that being an expat, we have quite a culture of drinking as well. Cause it's like, we always say that the expats, you're either running from something or like to something. And, and so alcohol ends up being in that a lot. And I had a friend who got just blacked out drunk, and witnessing that for me was really a final straw where I was just like, I never want to be like that again. I want the freedom. I started taking the alcohol challenge in January. I'd already been like 5 days sober at that point. And just, you know, and I've been sober ever since. And I started dating somebody who's also sober. So it's been amazing. My mom actually, after she read your book, she went sober as well for a couple of years. And she's actually just getting back on it again. But I feel like this is, for me, there's no going back. I have so much I want to do in life. I have so much, you know, I want to accomplish, and alcohol just doesn't play into that at all. So
Yeah, it's so good. So cool. That's awesome. I have a few kind of questions about some things that I just want to dig more into. So first of all, you got drunk with your babysitter. So like, can you tell me more about that? Like, was it the normal babysitter or your parents like not knowing what was that? Like, I'm just so curious. I'm like, how does that happen?
yeah, so she was a neighbor. I was probably, gosh, maybe I was like 10 or 11. No, I'm trying to remember, you know, it may have been that she had been my babysitter and then she took me to a party that she was going to, like, but maybe she wasn't actually my babysitter at that point. Cause I feel like 11, I must have been like 11 or 12. And yeah, it was just, I think in Baltimore, it was just kind of like, just,
Typical.
yeah.
So interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, like
No,
drugs, alcohol. Yeah.
I feel like it was very like, I didn't drink a lot, but I remember I don't even remember. I think my first drink was right around 12. And ironically, I was with my cousin's dad. So I guess he would, well, it was my second cousin. So it was my mom's cousin's son, I guess is what it was. And we were on a camping trip, and he had sent like all the kids on a camping trip with, we called him Uncle Nick. And we went hiking like way into the mountains. And then we were in a hot springs, and someone was passing around a drink, and everybody was super thirsty. And we were like sitting in this hot springs. We had backpacked up there. And I remember having a sip and like spitting it out because it was orange juice, but they had put vodka in it. So it's like, gosh, the orange juice got ruined. Oh my goodness. And so we didn't really, I mean, I didn't get drunk or anything, but it was like very much like, yeah, that was just very, it was totally normal to pass it to the 11 and 12-year-olds in the, oh, that's cute, that's fun, that's, whatever, which is just interesting. Yeah, it is interesting how we've just given alcohol such a pass of, yeah, which is crazy to think about how that could have happened, considering, I don't know, it's almost like we have this binary view, like there's this problem culture that everybody's well aware of, but then we don't separate any of the regular drinking. Like it's kind of two separate worlds that we were allowed to actually be under the same umbrella of getting drunk, right? It's like really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting as well, because the other thing that I forgot to say was that my body really started talking to me, because as I was getting healthier and as I was working out, when I would go on these health spurts of not drinking for 3 months, and then I would have even one glass, I fainted like 3 times. So one time I was on a plane, I was getting off the plane, and I was waiting for my Uber, and I just had like a glass of wine on the plane. And as I was waiting for my Uber, I just fainted. I just passed out. I got a concussion.
Oh, wow.
And then another time I had gone on 3 months without drinking, and I went to this concert, and it was really hot. It was also really hot in the concert hall, but then I had a cocktail right afterwards, and I just fainted right in the bar as well. And then this past summer, the same thing happened, where we had the canicule, which is the heat wave that happened in Paris. It was like 110, 115 degrees. It was insane. And I had one glass of wine, and I fainted again. So it was like my body was just
no.
like, you're trying to get healthy, you're trying to get clean, and it's incredible. Our bodies are such wisdom inside of them, and we just need to, if we listen to them more often, imagine how much wiser and better off we would be.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. And, when this dawned on me for the first time, I feel like I had to take 2 or 3 days to really sit with it and be like, is that real? But basically it's the idea that, puking is your body's way of saving your life with drinking. And it was like, there's so many jokes about it, like, oh, worshiping the porcelain gods. And, it's just part of the night. The night was so good, I threw up. Like, I remember being in this is an embarrassing story, but it was for some reason I had this like marriage of, because I was in this international job of, so you could probably super relate, but of different cultures coming together in a certain country, and then all of us bringing our most rowdy selves, right? So we were in London, but it happened to be Australia Day, and we were with all the Australians. So we're with all these Brits and all these Australians at a pub, and just, I think everybody said, let's meet there at 10 in the morning. And we left, I think 12 hours later. And I got in the car and I threw up in the fancy black taxi cab. And it was just totally a mess. And I had to pay like £150 fine. And he was really mad and all this stuff. And it was super drama, one of those moments. But I remember it just being such a joke. Like, oh my gosh, Annie, like, way to go. Like, it was just such a joke. I got, it was like being part of the whole gang now, she's really part of it, man. She really showed up. The American girl, she puked in the cab, like, all this stuff. And just when I realized, like, wow, that's your body, like saying, we're going to die. like die. If like finito, if we don't get this out of your system. And it's terrifying. And then it's just a joke. It's like, how is that possible? But to your point, like your body is just like, I'm trying to do everything I can here, woman. Keep you alive, keep you healthy.
Yeah, and it's interesting the competitiveness that you're talking about. I mean, I remember especially the Brits being like, Americans can't drink, it's like, you guys don't know how to drink. And then that became like, well, watch me.
Yes, totally.
So it's like, let's see how much I can drink with you, which is completely ridiculous, because nobody ends up winning. And then, but then, the Brits did start kind of the dry January. Like that was really started in England. And I have a lot of friends who are starting to think like stopping for that month and what does that do? And why are you stopping? And if you're just doing it just to it feels like it just becomes something that you can just prove.
Yeah.
It's like, see, I stopped for a month, therefore like I'm good.
Right.
And I was actually always opposite, because I was like, why would I want to stop drinking in January? It's like the worst month in the entire calendar year. Like I'm going to stop drinking like in February or March, but like January, it was just an excuse for me to drink more. Because I was like, this is depressing, so I'm going to keep drinking. And that never works, obviously, because then you just get more depressed. But yeah, go ahead.
No, you go. I want to hear what you're going to say, because I'm going to remember what I was going to say.
Okay. Well, I was kind of going to go on the other side of it. Like the one thing I have, one of my other main reasons for really deciding to stop is because I really wanted, I quit the New York Times last year and I got into filmmaking, and I was finding that so many emotions are coming up as I'm creating this art, and especially going into people's lives, because I'm doing like a documentary, and then I actually did a short film on female rage, and exploring that topic brought up a lot, as you can imagine, a lot of emotions, which made me want to drink more kind of across the entire year. And as I had left my full-time job, I found that it was much easier to start drinking, not having those confines of 9 to 5. I was able to kind of start drinking earlier, and so I was pushing the boundaries a little bit more. But the biggest reason was really, I was really noticing that I was starting to numb myself with the alcohol. And honestly, I'd probably always been doing that, but it became just a lot clearer in this new world that I was in. And I realized that one of my biggest decisions to quit was really based around the fact that I wanted to feel all the emotions. Now, that's definitely been two-sided, and I have certainly been feeling all the emotions. And it can be really, really scary, but I also know that the only way to kind of get over, to heal, to continue to heal, is to feel them all. So yeah, I guess on the flip side, that's what I was going to say, is that it is scary, and I think it does take a lot of bravery, especially in this world, to quit. But yeah.
It's so good, because a few things there. Like first on the emotions, it's interesting because there's a lot of things that, my work, this Naked Mind, where I take the reason you're drinking and I kind of say, no, actually scientifically it doesn't work. It does this instead, right? So if we think about stress relief, right, it doesn't actually do that. It actually does the opposite. If we think about, really making us happier, it actually does the opposite, because it reduces our ability to feel pleasure and naturally. And so those things are so easy. But then when we come to, but I want something to numb me. No, it actually does that. And that can be really tough for people, right? Like they used to use it like as an anesthetic in surgery before they realized it was super toxic and found safer things to use. Mm. And so it does numb us. And so it's like this thing of, well, how do I combat that? And I think it isn't about reframing what alcohol does. It's about accepting it, but then reframing what emotions are, which you've just done really beautifully, in terms of like emotions are they're how our body talks to us. They're, the chemical production of our mind in showing and guiding us where we should and shouldn't be, and evolving us really, and growing us and showing us what's next for us. And so it's like you have this beautiful GPS, this beautiful map of like, here's the path, here's the way you should go, here's the direction, let me keep you in the beautiful areas and out of the deep scary forests, and here it is. And then I'm just going to turn that off and throw that whole map out the window, because the map is going to take me, like, it's not going to be the easiest road, but it doesn't make the road any less easy. You're still on the path. And guess what? You can only reasonably be drunk a certain number of hours per day, right? So you can only reasonably be numb a certain number of hours per day. And then if you're going to hold down a job or drive around or do anything else in your life besides sitting in your room drinking, which I think we all agree that doesn't sound like fun, 24/7, like you can't numb it all the time. So then you're on the path anyway, but you don't have the map because you've just numbed them. So now you find yourself in these deep, scary forests. And then it is a self-perpetuating thing, to follow my analogy all the way, is like, because then you're in the deep, scary forest. So now you need to numb even more because you're in the scary forest, right? And so alcohol, it does that thing. And I think that's a really interesting thing, but it's about thinking about how do I want my life to be? Do I want to live it awake? I like recently, I think I saw a quote, I think it was from Glennon Doyle, and it was, she might've been quoting somebody else, so I just don't want to give credit wrong, but basically the idea of the quote was that grief is the admission for love. Like it's saying, I experienced this, I had this, and like the pain, like without the contrast, without the up and the down, we wouldn't have it. If it was our wedding day every single day, or the day we won the lottery every single day, or the euphoria of whatever you want to, falling in love every single day, like we wouldn't physically be able to handle it. The brain would actually turn down that emotion too, because it just wouldn't be good for us. We'd be out of balance. But also you wouldn't love it as much. It's just this law of diminishing returns. And so allowing for all of the good and all of the bad, and saying, I'm going to consciously take this escape button and put it outside my life. It's not going to be in my life anymore. Are there going to be times when I want to push it? Absolutely. But I've made a decision that it's not in my life. And when I get through those times I want to push it, that's what real courage is. Because courage isn't taking the fear and pouring some alcohol on it so you don't feel it. Courage is feeling the fear, sitting in the fear. We think courage is a super sexy thing, like, ooh, courageous. But courage feels crappy because it's like literally feeling it all and sitting in it anyway. So I think I really like how you've reframed that for yourself. Because what you just said, I feel like is one of the deepest keys you have to accept and realize in order to be really successful.
Well, I mean, it's kind of ironic, like us talking today, because, well, I said that I was starting to date a guy who would, neither of us drank, and that's true. But actually, last night we realized that it wasn't going to work, and so I actually did go into this really deep. Honestly, I don't even know if it was about him, and it doesn't matter, but I went into this really deep despair, and I felt this horrifying fear, and like cry, one of those like deep guttural cries, that like where you're bent over and like you can't stop. And I honestly, I don't think I've had that type of cry in years. And I wonder how long it's been building up to that. And it was scary, and I must admit, like it took me to dark places, and I feel like this release today that I don't know that I would have felt, that probably would have just been postponed until God knows what would have happened, like how months or years from now. And I think that's the scariest part about the numbing, is that you're right. Like you still have to live your life, but in some ways it is just postponing everything. And imagine, like now I feel like I like pushed through. Well, I shouldn't say pushed through, because I don't.
You allowed.
Yes, allowed, more feminine energy. I allowed it to come through me, and actually now I feel like kind of excited for what's next. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's the release that was, I mean, I'm sure there'll be more, but.
But it's so beautiful because in those moments, like they feel like they stretch us and take us to the very edges of what's possible for us to experience as a human. Like that type of just guttural, like animalistic grief. But we've been conditioned in our society not to feel that, not even to feel that at death in Western society. Like we're supposed to sit there primly in our black, whereas like in the ancient societies, they'd be ripping their clothes and screaming for days. And it was a 7-day like ritualistic mourning of screaming and yelling and crying and all of these things. And maybe it wasn't 7 days. I don't know if that's exactly right, but I know it was a period. It was a mourning period. And now we're like, we take it and no wonder we drink. We like stuff it and stuff it and stuff it and stuff it. And so this bubbling thing is existing in us and helping all of the time. It's there. It's just like this low grade thing. It's like, when you have a huge air conditioner on in the background and then it goes off and you're like, wow, I didn't even know it wasn't silent until now. I feel the silence and I feel so much peace and I feel so much wholeness in this. And we have that. And like alcohol is like this tiny little thing that numbs it a little bit, but it doesn't take it away. And in fact, it prevents those really deep releases, because trust me when I tell you that weepy, cryy thing that happens when you get too drunk, it's not the same level of like emotional and spiritual purification and cleansing and release and relief, because you're not actually processing, you're not consciously present enough to process what's happening in your body. Your body's saying, I need this. If you're, getting drunk and getting weepy and sad and crying, you're like, there's something there and your body's trying to deal with it, but you're not conscious enough to actually have the entire experience and to bring it together so that it actually heals you and serves you. And I see it with my kids because kids haven't been conditioned not to feel the ups and downs, right? And so I have a 2-year-old daughter and she, oh my gosh, who knows what it was the other day, but as usual, throw herself on the floor, temper tantrum, hysterical crying, her face is red, everything's going wrong in the world. She hates everybody and everything, doesn't, whatever. And then she's done. And she gets up and walks over and starts playing like nothing. Like she's so done. Like it's gone. Like she's allowed it and then she's done. And like kids are so good at that when they're allowed, by the way, because
I was saying, you allow her.
Right, because how many parents are like, no, oh my God, my kid, like, no, temper tantrums are bad. No, it's part of it. Is it convenient if it happens in Target? Certainly not, but personally, but yeah, it's I love that what we're talking about because it's so true and it's so profound. It's great.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting as well because as I was drinking, it's like the anxiety, it also increased and I've read a lot of your research that you've done as well on anxiety levels. And I didn't get on a plane at one point last year because I had a couple of drinks before I got on, and that was enough to just increase level of anxiety and the thoughts in my head to the point where, like, I mean, who knows if my gut instinct would have been the same if I hadn't been drinking. I don't know, but all I know is that my anxiety level at that point was so high that I couldn't get on the plane, and I didn't get on the plane. And then the next morning, I was supposed to be in Paris. I was actually flying back from the States, and I got an email that I had this huge meeting with this like big producer in Paris, because I had this window of time that I was just going to be back for a few days. And so I had to like reschedule and like lost, however how much money on the airfare, and rebooked it and got on the plane like that day. But it was just another example of like, alcohol isn't helping. Like, it's not helping my career, it's not helping my relationships, it's not helping my emotional compass, it's not helping. And so there's just been sign after sign after sign, and Yeah. And it's interesting now that I actually put on my dating profile that I am not drinking. And because that was the hardest thing, was going on dates with people and then feeling like you're a freak. And I've been actually amazed at how many people have gotten in touch and be like, yeah, I'm not drinking either, or I stopped drinking. And it's kind of opened up this whole new world of, you know, men that wasn't available. I thought
And
all
what
the
a
good.
nice filter too, because you're like, well, yeah, maybe. And I think, so this is kind of what I was going to touch on earlier, and it fits perfectly here, is
Hmm.
what needs to happen, in my opinion. Um,
Yeah.
not that I'm very opinionated, but, but
Tell-
we need to stop looking at this like it's an addiction conversation, because for most people it's not, right? For most people it is a, just drinking more than is comfortable, more than I want to, but can stop for 30 days. If you can stop for 30 days, if you're doing dry January, if you're doing it to prove to yourself, you are proving to yourself that you're not, you don't fit the clinical definition of addiction to alcohol, because you can, by theory, stop without assistance, right? You're not going into delirium tremens, you're not having these withdrawal symptoms. And so, but the conversation we're having around alcohol is still an addiction conversation. And for me, like, what's so refreshing about you posting that on your dating app and then getting this whole pool of men opening up is because there's this underground conversation happening.
right.
And that's like, it's a wellness conversation. It's a health conversation. It's a like being awake to my life conversation. And, that is just really so awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And to think that there, like, 'cause to think that there are other men that are that aware, or yeah, I mean, there's so many levels, like, that aren't just trying to numb themselves as well, and that aren't, that, yeah, are interested in other things, and that because that was my biggest fear, was like, I didn't know how to date and not get drunk with the person and break the ice. And it's amazing how many friends as well, you start kind of realizing that they were only fun when you drank, and and things like that, and how it just shifts and changes. I've actually been pretty amazed at how many friends have been really supportive about it, which is, and in some ways it inspires them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, my friends definitely look different than they did 6 years ago. I think that it was twofold. It was definitely like people who we just didn't really have a lot in common with once the alcohol was taken away. And then also the people who we still hang out with a lot. I mean, gosh, I don't remember, even the people who still drink occasionally, I don't remember the last time I saw them drink. Like the drinking in my close-knit circle of friends has just so drastically reduced, because it
Mhm.
is that freedom or permission where one person's like, because not everybody is wanting to get drunk all the time. And so so many people are like, oh my gosh, thank goodness, I didn't want to have a hangover tomorrow night either, but I was just psyching myself up for it because that's what we always do together. And so I'm super stoked that you just ordered an iced tea or whatever the case is. And it's just funny because we do have this very intense perception of just keeping up with the Joneses when it comes to alcohol, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was my biggest fear, and that's why I don't think over the years it stuck with me, was because the people pleasing was so strong, and the wanting to not make other people feel uncomfortable, like wanting them. I mean, honestly, I think that was probably the biggest reason I got so drunk, was because I wanted people to feel comfortable, which is like so ridiculous. But yeah, but so telling of like the culture, and not really of me, but of well, and of me, and everybody else. But yeah.
So I'm going to ask you the question that I always ask kind of at the end here, but if you were going to go back to Meagan, who was um, drinking, and you were just going to tell her kind of about what her life looks like now, what would you tell her?
Oh gosh, I would tell her that the anxiety that that she felt going out in public, that she was enough without the alcohol, that just showing up as herself was all she needed, and she didn't need to fit in with alcohol or be anything other than her raw true self, and that in and of itself would be inspiring to others.
I love that so much. So good.
Mm-hmm.
So good. And it is so inspiring. I mean, that's like we inspire each other so much when we're not putting up pretense or trying to vulnerability is like, I think Brene Brown says, and it's just the truth, it's like the great connector, right? That you just show up as our authentic selves. It's awesome.
In this world we need so much of that. It's like we are the warriors, and they need us, and we need to. I mean, at this point, I'm not going back, and I'm just so grateful for you and all the work that you do, and the communities you built, the Facebook groups, the alcohol experiments. It's really amazing. So thank you for everything.
Oh, you're so welcome. I was just just randomly saw this picture, and it was a bunch of traffic signs, and they were all stacked on each other, and they basically say, like, if there's to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. If there's to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there's to be peace in the cities, there must be peace between neighbors. If there's to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. If there's to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. And I don't think that the cognitive dissonance and the internal battle that we fight when we are drinking and it isn't sitting with what we know is truest for us, or what we know is best for us, or what we know in our heart is our most honest path, that we can have peace, and so how can we expect there to be peace in the world when we're like, in such a battle inside? And not saying that alcohol, this one domino, is the thing that's going to bring world peace or anything like that, but just knowing for me that internal fight of both wanting to drink more and wanting to drink less at the same time, really destroyed me at like a soul level. And so, being able to be whole inside, it has such a ripple effect into your home, into your neighborhood, into your family, and ultimately into the world. It's just awesome.
Yeah, the cognitive dissonance was the biggest thing for me, and that piece, like you said, is for me. It's the freedom. It's freedom, and that's what I've been looking for this whole time. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Meagan. It's just been such a pleasure, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thanks for taking it late, and
thank you for having me, and I look forward to hearing you more on the podcast. So
awesome.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
All right. Bye.
Are you ready for a deep dive and truly lasting change? If so, you might consider my intensive program. It's a 9-week self-led program that you can do in the complete comfort of your own home, and it will truly transform your relationship with alcohol. If you want to learn more about this, go to thisnakedmind.com/intensive. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, as it truly helps the message reach somebody who might need to hear it today.